Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. Today's readings from Jeremiah and Luke both come in the context of discussions about the end of all things and the final judgment of this world. Yet both readings are remarkably hopeful as well. The parable in Luke is pretty straightforward. Jesus is clear right up front about what he wants his listeners to learn. They need to pray always and not to lose heart. The villain in his parable would have seemed very familiar to his Jewish listeners living under the powerful weight of Roman oppression. In a certain city, he said, there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. Oh yes, they must have nodded to one another. We know that judge. We know that city. They had stood before magistrates before and received no justice and no respect. We know what it means to get no respect and no justice from those in authority, they must have thought. On the other hand, the hero of Jesus' parable may have come as a surprise to them, for it wasn't a prophet or a rabbi or even a Maccabean-style rabble-rouser. It was a woman, and a poor widow at that, one of the least resourced and most powerless people in the ancient world, with little standing in that society. The power she wielded was not status or the sword or great oratory skill. The only power she had was the power of persistence. Bruce Cockburn wrote a song about what it's like to be poor, to have no power, he sang, but the strength to endure. And sometimes, especially in difficult times, the only power you have is the power of persistence. And as I wrote this sermon, I had in my mind almost the whole time the image of Violet raising her hands during the children's time. Because during the children's time, before I even begin speaking, a lot of Sundays, Violet will raise her hand. And I want to involve everybody, so I will often take my time. And she's very patient. She doesn't push or anything, but she doesn't put her hand down either. And eventually, we need to hear from Violet. So that she has been modeling persistence for us just about every week leading up to this service. So sometimes that is the only power we have. Yet in Jesus' parable, the persistence of the poor widow overcomes the powerful indifference of the unjust judge and changes things for the better. Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice. And if an unjust judge can be swayed, Jesus declared to his followers, then how much more will God grant justice to God's people who cry day and night? Yet he asks in a very typical Jesus twist, he leaves them with the question, yet when the fully human one finally comes, will he find faith on earth? In other words, Jesus seems to be saying the universe will bend toward justice. God will grant justice to those who ask, who seek, who persist. But will they, will anyone, will we persist in seeking and working and praying for goodness and justice in our world? Or will we lose faith in the end? According to Jesus, everything in our lives, everything in the world depends on the answer to that question. And there's something important here that I think to which we need to pay attention. In a materialistic, status-obsessed, power-over kind of world, and also in the midst of stewardship season here at Church of the Savior, when we're thinking about how to use our resources to make a difference in the world, Jesus reaffirms the importance of prayer as a way to take care of and transform the world around us. This is counterintuitive for most of us these days. In fact, I would venture to say that the truth is that most of us don't believe it anymore. Maybe if we were able to receive the realm of God more like a little child, we wouldn't have so much trouble trusting the power of prayer in our lives. Or maybe we're just confused about what prayer is supposed to be. After all, the widow is not persistently asking for money, praying for a new purse, or even for some special privilege for herself. She was, we hear, asking for justice. for fairness, for something wrong to be made right. My mother is no saint, I would say, at least not in the traditional sense of that word. She's a complicated woman who has led a mostly beautiful yet complicated life. Now at age 92, facing a number of challenging physical and cognitive issues, her world has shrunk to the size of a small one-bedroom apartment. Like the widow in Jesus' parable, she has no real power in the sense that this world thinks of power. She depends on us, her children, to be able to continue to live on her own at all. Yet, her world and her power are larger and greater than it appears because of one thing. She prays. Every time I talk to her, she tells me how she has been praying for me, my sisters, her grandchildren, and the world. She often knows more about what's going on in the world than I do. Praying for anyone or anything she may hear about on the news or through the grapevine. And sometimes she will tell me with awe, "John, all my prayers are getting answered lately." And almost all of those prayers are for others and for things that are wrong that need to be set right. Prayer, said Jonathan Edwards, is as natural an expression of faith as breathing is to life. In other words, prayer is to faith as breathing is to life. Think about that. Figures as diverse as Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King Jr., Henry Nouwen and Walter Wink, Dorothy Day and Mahatma Gandhi have all said again and again that prayer is essential to transforming our spiritual lives and our world. The message is that there's something essential about prayer because it reflects something essential about the nature of our world. The persistence of the widow who seeks justice in an unjust world would be a sign of insanity if it were not a reflection of a deeper reality, the persistence of God and God's care for an unjust world. Over and over again in the Bible, God is ready to give up on humanity and on the world. It doesn't. Over and over again, God persists in forgiveness and reconciliation, in liberation, in lifting up those who have been pressed down, and identifying not with the powerful, but with those who are weak and hurting and oppressed. The strength to endure, the power to persist is not just something we have to gin up. It's not just bucking up and hanging on by our own strength. It's about trusting and tapping into the persistence of God. The days are surely coming, says the Holy One, when I will make a new covenant with my people. It won't be like the old covenant, a covenant that they broke again and again, though I was their beloved partner. This time, I will put my law within them. I would say I would put my law of love within them. And I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. When we are at the end of our lives, or the end of our rope, or simply overwhelmed by the troubles of this world, we have this promise. The one who made the world also persists in loving the world. And by tapping into that power, into that great love, we can persist too in seeking and working and, yes, praying for goodness and justice to prevail in our lives and in our world. Now, we seem to think that prayer is for mystics or conservative evangelicals or for another less enlightened time. Perhaps prayer is too passive for us, or maybe it's just passé. But prayer was an important part of things like the Civil Rights Movement led by Dr. King and the Independence Movement led by Gandhi. In preparations for civil rights actions in the late 50s and 60s, participants were urged to, quote, meditate daily on the teachings and life of Jesus, and, quote, pray daily to be used by God. It was an important part of their training to do civil disobedience, to change the world. According to Mahatma Gandhi, prayer is not an old woman's idle amusement. Properly understood and applied, it is the most potent instrument of action. I don't think we think of it that way. Jesus seemed to believe the same thing. Pray then in this way, he taught his disciples. And among the other things that he taught them to pray for, he said, pray to God that your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Prayer played an important role in the life of Jesus and the lives of many great social reformers, yet we do not persist in prayer. then wonder why change is so slow to come to our lives and to our world. In his book, The Powers That Be, Walter Wink wrote, "Those who are the bearers of tomorrow's transformation undergo what others might call disciplines," and he's referring to spiritual disciplines, but not to punish themselves or to ingratiate themselves to God. They simply do what is necessary to stay spiritually alive, just as they eat food and drink water to stay physically alive. And the most important of these disciplines is prayer. Jesus offers us this parable about our need to pray always and not to lose heart. Because God seeks us, God breathes prayer in us, God opens a way for us, waits for us to be partners with the holy in the healing of our world.